Happy Thanksgiving week. Welcome into Texans on Tap. I'm Brandon Strange with Charlie Palillo and Josh Jordan from SportsMap. You can read their work on sportsmap.com and follow them on X at Palillo and at Josh Jordan 975. On today's episode, we're going to get into some of the postmortem of Titans Texans. Texans have lost 4 of 6, travel to face the 2-9 Jags Sunday, who are losers of their last 4, who are coming off their bye week. Apologies to Charlie, who will tell you that is the incorrect term for a team's off week. Houston, and I mean all of Houston, is hoping to see the Texans get well against another bad division rival. We're going to break that game down first, but just a reminder to hit like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, click the bell for notifications so you know when new content drops, like when we go live after every game this season. If you're on the go, we're on all your favorite podcast apps. Just search Texans on Tap. Gents, CJ Stroud and the Texans have been walking through their own version of the Sopranos fever dream episode. Josh, if CJ is Tony, that maybe that makes Bobby Slowick the talking fish, or maybe D'Amico is Tony and Titus Howard is the fish. Whichever the case, someone's headed towards an ominous boat ride in the offseason. Sorry, I'll move on. But I do want to circle back to CJ specifically because he's become a lightning rod of criticism over the past several weeks. He hasn't looked great, in all honesty. Quarterback rating of under 80 the last 4 games. Josh, you've been taking exception to some of these criticisms with people calling him CJ fraud and nonsense like that. What do you see in the tape that makes you think differently? And Charlie, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, I just went and looked at some of the really pivotal plays in that game. And the first one I want to look at is the Nico Collins play where he was intercepted on that throw, where it looks like CJ said he put a little more air under it. It probably wouldn't have been an interception, probably would have been a big play. He underthrew it a little bit. But to me, the problem with it is how it's set up. When I went back and looked at it, they have all the cut-ups on YouTube and everything. The Texans had 7 pass protectors in to deal with 4 rushers, and CJ still got hurried. So at right tackle, Titus Howard gets beat quickly. Defender kind of falls right at CJ's feet, making him step up. While that's going on, Scruggs and Patterson lose a double team to the defensive tackle, so pressure comes right up the middle. And then they have Shaq Mason pulling to go all the way to the other side to catch the pass rusher coming outside of Laramie Tunsil, along with a tight end and a running back. Shaq Mason barely got there in time, and he still had 3 guys to deal with that. So CJ's having to do this, step up, then let it go. When you had 7 guys to deal with 4 pass rushers, you had a double team on a D tackle that allowed the pressure right up the middle. So, clearly they failed. That should not have been the case. CJ should have had more time to read the field. He shouldn't have been immediately just trying to get out of trouble. And you have to think about it too. When you have 7 guys in to help protect, think how many other options CJ has to throw to if you're dedicating 7 guys to protection. So there's not that many guys out in the route to where he has his, pick of whoever he wants to throw to. The other one I looked at was, I think, maybe the most important one in the game. 3rd and 9 with 2 minutes left, right before Fairbairn misses that field goal. On this one, really strange how they set up the protection here. You had 2 pass rushers that were outside of Tunsil on his left side. And then you also have Scruggs, who's getting ready to deal with Sweat at D tackle. But what happens there? Well, Sweat drops out, and then a linebacker comes right up the middle. So instead of going to pick up one of those 2 edge rushers on his outside near Tunsil, he double teams the linebacker along with Patterson and just lets one of those 2 pass rushers that Tunsil doesn't pick up run in immediately and blow up the play. CJ was lucky just to be able to throw it away out of bounds. That they're giving up so much pressure immediately. He didn't have a chance. And the problem is so often on 2nd down, you're running into a brick wall. So CJ's having to deal with 3rd and 11, 3rd and 10 very often. And then immediately Scruggs gives up that pressure. CJ had no chance. He was lucky just to get rid of the ball. So often on 3rd down, they don't even have a legitimate opportunity to make a play. This is happening way too often. It's at critical points in the game. And then just quickly about that safety at the end of the game, everybody's saying it was Orlovsky and all that kind of stuff. He wasn't running out of bounds for a long period of time thinking he's still in bounds trying to throw the ball. When the safety happened was essentially as he was getting tackled. The reason why it looked like that, if you looked how they painted the end zone for that game, there was a blue inner rectangle, and then there was field grass, and then there was the out of bounds marker. So it kind of looked like CJ was stumbling around out of bounds when really he was still a part of the end zone. It was when he was being contacted was essentially when his foot was down. So to call it an Orlovsky thing where he's just running around where he's been out of bounds for seconds, that's not what happened. I just think CJ's getting a lot of criticism here. He's not playing as well as he wants to. I'm not saying he's playing great, but I am saying there are certain points in the game where his offensive line is giving him no chance to get things done. And then, of course, if you look at, the penalty where they had the two guys in motion at the same time, if that doesn't happen, CJ throws for 3 touchdowns in that game, close to 300 yards, and they win. So it's just these little things that keep hurting them. And then, of course, Joe Mixon couldn't run the ball at all last week. When you're making CJ wear the cape and do everything and your O-line can't do their job, I don't know what you expect.
Next week, Josh, I want you combing through the Zapruder film. Excellent work there. Look, probably the oldest bromide in football is it all begins in the trenches. And the Texans' offensive line doesn't cut it. The interior is just woebegone. The Patterson-Scruggs tandem just gets ragdolled way too often. I do not understand with the continuity that they have, right? All of these guys playing now were here last season. Scruggs missed a good chunk to start his rookie season, but played late in the year. Patterson was here all year. Right? The only guy who didn't play was Kenyon Green, who's now out of the picture. Shaq Mason here. The tackles here. That they are so often baffled. It's as if the Texans are the only offensive line that faces stunts and games. The breakdowns have just been colossal, and it speaks to poor coaching as well as poor play. Right? We've mentioned Chris Strausser, the offensive line coach with a thin NFL resume, though most recently offensive line coach of the Colts. I don't remember the Colts getting just pistol whipped in pass protection to the extent the Texans are. Right? CJ Stroud, with the loss to the Titans, has now been sacked one more time this season than he was sacked the entirety of last season. Having said all that, CJ can't get a pass. I didn't realize the numbers had dipped this badly. He absolutely has been less accurate this season. He's not had the consistency of ball placement. Now, there are two primary measures of quarterback statistically. The long-standing quarterback rating, where a perfect score for a game is 158.3. It's an odd compilation. We were told there would be no math. Quarterback rating, it's all about math. Completion percentage, yards per attempt, touchdown pass percentage, interception percentage. And they cobble it all together. And if you're perfect, you score 158.3. As Brandon mentioned, CJ Stroud has not even cracked 80 now, 4 games in a row. An average starting NFL quarterback in this era is over 90 in his quarterback rating. So that's the traditional quarterback rating. Then for, I don't know, maybe a decade now or so, a little longer, QBR, which ESPN developed, and it's a more objective evaluation in theory. In quarterbacks are graded on each play. So if a quarterback throws a screen pass that turns into a 75-yard touchdown, the quarterback doesn't get credit for throwing a great pass, threading the needle, getting it over the linebacker in front of the safety. He dumped it off 4 yards, and the running back weaved and made a great play. If a wide receiver has a ball tip off his hands, that's a good throw, and it winds up as an interception. In QBR, the quarterback's not penalized for that. Conversely, if an incompletion should have been picked off, the quarterback gets a bad grade for that play. Well, CJ Stroud, in traditional quarterback rating, ranks 25th this season, immediately behind Aaron Rodgers and immediately ahead of the Bears rookie Caleb Williams. Well, in QBR, where you graded play per play, and it's not just math, CJ Stroud is 25th this season in QBR. And if you want to say, wow, these cockamamie formulas, in traditional quarterback rating, top 3 in the league, Lamar Jackson, Jared Goff, Joe Burrow. Top 3 in QBR, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen. Quite clearly, CJ Stroud has fallen off and is not running with the big dogs. He's a middle-of-the-pack AFC quarterback this season. I think the right side of the middle of the pack and still a very good growth stock, But if the Texans can't clean up their offensive line, neither CJ Stroud nor the Texans can ever fulfill what we thought was the offensive potential of this team coming into the season.
Yeah, one of the frustrating things about the struggles that they're having right now, and we talked about this in the post game, was D'Amico Ryan's quotes. After the Titans game, he said that the offense did enough and the loss was on the defense. But the offense only scored 20 points. The defense had 8 sacks and was the only side of the ball for Houston that scored a touchdown in the second half. Gaslighting is an overused term online, with most people using it incorrectly. But saying that the Texans offense did enough is textbook gaslighting. That's exactly what the definition is. Look, if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to give us your thoughts on CJ as well. Are you still believers? Let us know. Let's get into week 13, guys. Texans face the Jags. This was a close game last time. It was a touchdown with seconds to play that clinched the comeback. Texans are a mess right now. Penalties, pressures, no run game, inaccuracy from Stroud. The question would have sounded silly just a few weeks ago, but do you think Houston's offense can muster enough points to pull this game out on the road?
Well, in Jacksonville, they might say the Texans are a mess. You want mess? Check out our operation from the very top, ownership down. Head coach Doug Peterson probably about to get fired. The Belichick rumors are going to start there because the AFC South is so soft. If he's going to go somewhere where he can try to turn it around and win quickly, they have a quarterback, in theory, in Trevor Lawrence. The general manager, Trent Baalke's probably going to be. But one thing Jacksonville has is 2 good edge rushers. Josh Hines-Allen is a top-tier player. Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter are not clearly better than Josh Hines-Allen, who's now making $30 million per year, more than Anderson and Hunter may combine this season. Trayvon Walker, maybe for an overall number 1 pick, which he was in 2022, isn't the game wrecker that you might envision, but he has 7.5 sacks. After significant development in his second season over his rookie season. I guess the good news and concept is they're both primarily outside rushers. The Texans' best offensive linemen, again in theory, are Laramie Tunsil and Titus Howard, the tackles. Right? If you can push the pocket up the middle against the too often helpless Texans interior, well, we'll see how Jacksonville deploys those guys. Maybe they move Allen Walker to the inside. Jacksonville's defense actually has been reasonably credible this season. They lost a 12-7 game to Minnesota. Like the Texans, they lost at the gun to Green Bay. They did lose 52-6 to Detroit in their most recent outing. They have had the open week to decide whether they're going to compete the rest of the season. But Jacksonville defense is middle of the pack. The Texans, I feel confident in the first half, should be able to inflict offensive damage upon the Jacksonville D. After halftime, I'm backing out.
Speaking of which, I kind of want to address the D'Amico stuff quickly, Brandon, that you brought up there, and the first half, second half stuff. So PFF had some really interesting stuff on this. So we talk about the first half and second half. The last 6 games, we know the Texans have had that 1 second half touchdown. That's over 30 drives. It was a 1-yard touchdown for Mixon in garbage time against the Cowboys. So it's not exactly like, ooh, what an impressive thing there. They are a top 5 offense in the first half. They are a bottom 5 offense in the second half. In the Titans game, they had 7 drives of 5 plays or less. That should tell you a lot right there. Third most in the NFL. They have punted the ball 56 times this season, the Texans. And then finally, the one I wanted to get to, I thought this was an interesting stat. Only 3 times in the entire NFL this season, a team didn't gain a first down rushing the ball on the ground with their running back. 2 of them were the Texans, the Titans game and the Vikings game. And it's not just the pass protection. We know it's the running. As I just mentioned that stat, 2 out of Mixon's last 3 games, he's under 2 yards per carry. It's a disaster. But here's the positive thing. It's finally coming around. Charlie's right. The Jags defense, kind of middle of the pack, but their pass defense is absolutely terrible. They're allowing a 111.5 passer rating, which is dead last in the NFL. They're 31st in completion percentage that the Jags defense is allowing. And they're also giving up 28.7 points per game. That's 30th in the NFL. They're also 29th on third down. So if there was ever a week for CJ Stroud and Tank and Nico Collins to get things going, especially in the red zone through the air, this is the week.
Texans are averaging 9 points per game in the second half, and that's including defensive points. put on the board. D'Amico, he's just at a little phase where the love fest is over. Right? He started 0-2 and then 10-5 the rest of the way, win a playoff game, coach of the year candidate. And these are the first challenging times. And, as a head coach, he's still not all that experienced in his media dealings. A double-edged sword that's cutting you both ways in blaming it on the defense. Well, D'Amico is the defensive play caller, right? He's his own defensive coordinator in function. So if you put it all on the defense, that's putting it all on the head coach. Is that worse than just sounding silly in saying, it wasn't about the offense when, week after week after week, it stinks like turkey left out on the counter for 4 days after Thanksgiving.
I think, the other frustrating thing is that there doesn't really seem to be any adjustments being made, at least not any that seem to be like obvious. And Josh, to your point about the 56 punts for Houston this season, if you told me that 50 of them were on the second half, I'd believe you. Yeah. The Jags are an enigma on offense themselves. They're averaging just under 19 points per game this season. However, they have put up 37 against the Colts, 32 against the Pats, and 27 against the Packers. They have not been good with Mac Jones under center, but Trevor Lawrence, who's been nursing that gimpy toe and shoulder, was limited in practice again on Wednesday. He's hoping to play on Sunday. It looks like, unless there's any setbacks, he will. Obviously, we know Christian Kirk's out for the season. I know this side of the ball favors Houston, but I have to ask, what should Houston be looking for on defense to prevent the Jags from upsetting the Texans on Sunday?
The chronic problem for defense, which when you look at the personnel and the tandem of Hunter and Anderson, the Texans could have 2 Pro Bowl defensive linemen. They should not get torched by the big play as often as they do. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but touchdown passes of 30, 40 yards and much longer than that, they surrender way too many. So if Brian Thomas catches a 64-yard touchdown pass from Trevor Lawrence, no one should be surprised. Evan Engram, nice tight end, but he's averaging 8.2 yards per reception. If somehow he gets up the seam, the safety loses him, and he catches a 38-yard touchdown pass, we shouldn't be surprised. The Texans have just been absolutely destroyed by the big plays more than the overall defense would seem to should be allowing, right? The pass rush is pretty good. So on the back end, right, Kalen Bullock has a number of interceptions. He's also been beaten badly a few times. Derek Stingley is a very good player. I don't think he's having a season that people would be talking about, wow, this is like Deion Sanders in his heyday. Kamari Lassiter has been in and out, having a nice rookie season, but he also has been beaten a few times. Jalen Petrie actually grades out better than I would have thought overall. Well, you're not going to have him on the field Sunday. So just stop giving up as many big plays as they are. It's been a serial problem this season.
Yeah, that's what it is right there. And that's what are you going to do without Petrie? Eric Murray was absolutely terrible last week against the Titans. Murray had a 37.5 PFF rating last week. Bad. And without Petrie, you're going to have to play Murray more, and you're going to have to play Jimmy Ward more. You don't have any of those guys to, have Jalen to step in. Jalen had been playing well, and Sting had some good games, Derek Stingley, but he was bad against the Titans last week. 43.3 was his PFF rating. For him, that's atrocious. So those guys got to step it up. Kamari Lassiter, nice to have him back. You have to wonder, he missed a couple games. Is it just going to be a couple, 3 games for Petrie, or is this going to be a thing where he has surgery, he's out for the season? We'll have to find that out later. But yeah, I think Charlie hit on it. Brian Thomas, you can't let him beat you over the top. That they got to be careful with that. And I think they will, but I said it last week. This is a Texans team where they can show up and win a big game and beat just about anybody, or they can lose to just about anybody. I like that D'Amico came out and said, I want these guys to still be feeling the sting of this Titans defeat like throughout the week. Usually D'Amico is always about, flush it on to the next game. There's nothing we can do about what happened. I'm glad that he's kind of pushing on them like, hey, you should feel bad about this loss. That was a bad one at home. I'm sure Hannah McNair wasn't too happy about that either, with all the stuff with the Titans owners and the rivalry they've kind of had. Finally, in conclusion, I'd like to say what's troubling me is how often all these historic things are happening to the Texans where they end up losing games, getting 5 interceptions and you still end up losing, and all the stuff in the Vikings games and what happened in this Titans game. Way too often we're having to look in NFL history and look stuff up and see if stuff like this has ever happened before. So hopefully they get this cleaned up, because, man, this next stretch of games after the off week, it's going to be tough.
Before we get to predictions, I want to get your final X factors for Sunday's game. We're also interested in hearing everyone's X factor, so make sure you tell us in the comments what you're watching for. Charlie, what's your final X factor or X factors you'll be watching for Texans Jags?
Yeah, this is take a team temperature. I mean, if you lose back-to-back games to a 2-8 team and a 2-9 team, they're still going to win the division. The Texans could completely collapse and go 1-4 the rest of the way, finish 8-9. The Colts would have to win 4 of their last 5 games for the Texans not to win the AFC South. So winning the AFC South would be nothing to brag upon. I want to see a focused, attention-detailed, competent performance, like holding the penalties to single digits would be not quite a break in the monotony, but they've top 10, I think, 4 times this season. Hey, Alshire, you're not Ray Lewis, especially when your biggest hits are on guys out of bounds. The undisciplined play, right? There are dead ball penalties, and then there are stupid personal foul penalties. Clean that stuff up, not so much because it's the difference in beating what should be a largely helpless Jacksonville team, but if you want to forget being taken seriously, be a serious team at the end of this season. It's time to tighten up the operation.
Yeah, I agree. I think first things first, I want to see the offense be efficient. I want to see guys getting open and CJ having time to get the ball out on schedule, not to have to be holding on to it and dodging in the pocket. Let's get some stuff that's on time and quick. It's something that looks like they've actually practiced during the week and not just went, hey, CJ, figure it out. So that's what I'll be looking for, because CJ's a proud guy coming off that rookie of the year, and he's been taking it, man. And he's owned it all in press conferences. But at some point, for his own confidence, just everything for him and his own mindset, go out there and have a quality performance, build that confidence back up. And then you have the off week to kind of self-scout a little bit and maybe put together some wrinkles in the offense for the final stretch of the season.
Yeah, to piggyback on Charlie's point, I'd love to see Houston play with some pride and stop playing down to the competition, like even they have admitted. I'm going to be watching for Darian Gumbawale this week. He's a former Jag, so there's always that revenge factor. And he had some big plays in week 4, including a big 3rd down conversion, and he scored the game winner. So I'll be looking for him. As we record this, the Texans are just 4-point favorites. Hey, we talked about Vegas not catching up to the Texans. Looks like they caught up to them. 4 points was the exact margin of victory in week 4. The total for the game is set at 43.5. If you're watching this on YouTube, give us your final score predictions in the comments. Charlie, we start with you this week. Final score, Texans Jags.
Last week, I said I feel like the Texans shouldn't be favored by 8.5 or whatever the number was over anybody, and then picked them to win easily. Good pick. Well, here I am again on the road, laying points. Okay. 4's the number. Texans 23, Jaguars 17.
I'll stay chalky, 24-20 Texans. I think they got to show us something this week.
Yeah, I'm gonna let my my steel blue colored lenses guide my pick this week. So I'm going to say 27-13. I do think they're going to take some pride. I think CJ Stroud's probably hearing the criticism as well. Hopefully they're all hearing the criticism and they respond to it appropriately. So we'll see. That's going to be it for this episode of Texans on Tap. We hope to see you back here live on YouTube late afternoon on Sunday following Texans Jags. So make sure you're subscribed with your notifications on. Come on back, join in on the conversation, and hopefully, mercifully, we'll get to break down a Houston win. And until then, go Texans.